up? Acidicloop back again, and today we're going to do a video on create a track, where I'm just going to basically break down how I create a track. Today we're going to use an easy one, which is only going to have about 3 different tracks to it, which is Ain't No Sunshine, a little Bill Withers blues tune. I got my guitar over here. I may go ahead and jam out on that as well. I probably won't do any singing because it's early in the morning. My vocals are not quite there yet, so I may not ruin your ears with some of that business as well. But anyways, so throughout my looping career for about 15 years, I've been using the iPad pretty much alone. That's been my main looping. But recently I've got this Akai Force, and I'm really kind of digging what it does. And so I've been using this a lot more for my shows. And I want to kind of go over my process for using this thing. If you're not familiar with this, it's similar to Ableton Live, but you don't need a computer. Everything's built in. It's a self-contained groove box, all that you need to make scenes, clips, instruments, drum tracks, whatever. They're all built into the Akai Force. It's pretty awesome. It actually works in this kind of manner here. You have what they call 8 tracks right here across. So going vertically, you have what they call tracks. Going horizontally, you have what they call scenes, where I can launch scenes. And these would be akin to like an intro or a verse or a chorus or what have you. I can launch those, and in each track will be a series of different clips that you've created. Now, you're not just stuck with 8. You can just hit this right here and move over and actually get more, tracks that you want. But you are limited based on whatever version or whatever type of track that you're going to do. So, for instance, if I hold down on the track button, which is right down here, like this. Oops, I'm sorry, wrong one. If I hold down on the track button there, you'll see I actually have the option to pick one of these here. I have an audio track, which would be things like a WAV file that I've got. So if you're doing clip launching with this, that's what you would be using the most of. There is a limit on how many tracks you can have for audio tracks. I think it's 8. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but I believe it's 8. So that's a little bit limited in that sense, but you can have as many clips in that track as you want. Next one is drum track. I don't think you're limited to that particular one, but that's where you're going to put in MIDI tracks for drums and such, so if you have a drum kit or whatever. And then you have plugins, which is what I prefer myself, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But that would be things like different virtual instruments, stuff like that. Then you got key groups. Now, plugins, by the way, you're limited, again, as well on that. I think it's 8, if I'm not mistaken. And then you got key groups, which is unlimited. And it has its advantages, but to me it also has some disadvantages. But that's essentially you're creating an instrument using samples of different keys and stuff. And then you have MIDI, which sometimes I'll use if I'm doing auto sampling with my iPad or whatever. But then you also have CV, which I don't really use, so I don't get into that. For the plugin versus key group, I understand that the key group is a little bit more efficient on CPU and RAM, which is important for this. But it's what it is when you made the sample. So whatever you made for a sample, that's kind of what it is. Now, you can tweak the sound of it a little bit with your EQ and all that kind of stuff, but with a plugin, at any time that you bring up your project, you can actually tweak the actual instrument in real time, and it will affect whatever you've recorded for a clip, which is pretty awesome. So I actually prefer going that way because sometimes I'll tweak something after the fact I've made it. So we're going to use those today. So what I've done is I've made a new project, and I've deleted the 2 that are there, which is a plugin and audio track. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a drum track on the first one right here. Okay, so that's that track. I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to add a plugin. That'll be for my bass. And then next I'll add another one, and that'll be for my keys. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and just label these by double-clicking on top of that. And I'll go ahead and say what this one is going to be. This one here is going to be a bass, just like that. And if these are out of order, if you like the bass after the keys, you can just simply move these, or I'm sorry, if you want the bass before the drums, you can simply move it with that little button that little thing right there. And that'll move where this is actually at in the matrix. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click on this one. This one will be for keys. There we go. All right. So we now have our drums, bass, and keys all ready to rock and roll. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. I've kind of zoomed in a little bit on the matrix here so you can see it. So on this side over here on the, my arm's in the way. In this side over here you have, these are your main important things here. You got the matrix, which will bring you this particular view here. But you also have a clip view, which you can actually view some of the tracks that you've made, some of the MIDI information and stuff. So that's pretty awesome. So what we're going to do in this particular one is I've already got a drum kit that I like to use. So let's go ahead and move over by hitting on this right here to move over to this track. And inside of a track, or whatever you want to call this, a lane, I think they just basically call it a track. I can have as many clips as I want from whatever that drum track is. So I can have one variation of a beat here, another variation of a beat here. But you can't have two beats or two different clips playing in the same track at the same time. Which is why you have a limit on how many you can actually have for like audio tracks and plugins. So you got to be mindful of that when you're making your tracks, because again, if you're only limited to 8, then it is what it is. But if I wanted to make a track just for kick, so I can EQ the kick differently, then I can have just this drum kit, and then I can make another track right beside it and have it for tops, for be like, snare and whatever, and then I can have another one for percussion. So I can have like 3 drum tracks to make a complete beat. But do keep in mind, again, if you have 2 tracks here, in 2 clips in a track, you can't play them both at the same time, but you can play them across in a scene. You can play them at the same time. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to be doing here. So for the drum one here, I'm going to go ahead and hit load here, and I've actually got my hard drive hooked up, my USB hard drive in the back there. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to my drum kits. There is a particular one I like, and let me turn this down for a second because it's going to get loud for a minute. And I'm going to go down to the one that I've made, just to kind of show you here. That one right there, that's the one I want. That's my huckleberry. All right, so I've loaded that now, but you don't see anything here on the pads. That's because you actually are in launch mode right there. And that's where you can launch clips. Well, I'm going to go down to note mode right there. And now you'll be able to see that I've got some different samples here. So in this particular case, I've made this out of using different samples. And you can go ahead and take a look here at the track edit. So if I go to menu and go to track edit, you'll see that there is a variety of different, if I go ahead and double click on this up here. Yes, no, maybe. Samples, there we go. So you can see here that for the track that I'm on, which is this particular one, you can see that I've applied this particular sample for that, this one here, so on and so forth. So I've actually made these. Now, you'll notice that one's got a little bit of delay to it, and that's why I like this as well, because you can actually assign different effects to each different pad. There are some drum machines that I've used, like on the iPad, that are limited in that fact that it's going to be an all or nothing. An example would be Groovebox by Amplify. So the drum kit's there. You can apply a certain amount of effects to it, but it's for the whole drum track. And sometimes I don't want that. Sometimes I don't want that delay for the kick, right? So in this particular case, to be able to view the information that, to be able to set something like that, normally you would say, I'm going to go to Mixer. But if you go to Mixer, you'll notice in this track, it's for the whole drum track. But if you hold Shift and Mixer, you'll see that you have individual ones now. So if I hit these, okay, those will tell me my individual ones that I'm on. So in this particular case, I have this one for this particular hi-hat. Now if I go to Effects, which is right there, you'll notice right here I've got a delay track onto it, and I've got it as a dotted eighth, and a little bit of the mix down through there as well. And you can add as many of these types that you want here. Well, actually, I'm sorry, you can only do 4 inserts for this, but you can do what they call submixes, but that's something different. So in this particular case, you can see that's what I've added to this particular one. Now for my kick, you can see I've actually added some paramedic EQ there and a little bit of reverb just to give it a little bit of body to it, And then I got the snare. I don't have anything on that. It's nice and dry, but I can actually do something with that. But I'm going to be mainly messing with these 2 up here. So I'm keeping this one with a little bit of reverb, but this one I'm not. So I'm keeping that one kind of dry, but I'm going to be doing like a kind of deal with this particular groove, okay? So that's where that's the makeup of this particular drum kit, okay? So back to Mixer. This is for the whole drum track, but you can do individual ones by holding Shift and then Mixer. Pretty awesome stuff. All right. Now, what is also pretty cool is that you can actually use what they call a step sequencer, or you can actually make the clip itself and then do like a piano roll scenario, like a MIDI, like actually paint in the MIDI notes. So for this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this clip right here. First off, I'm going to only keep it for 2 bars. So I'm going to hold shift, and then on the bottom here, if I hold this one, you'll see that I actually have the ability to set however many bars that this particular clip is going to be. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and dial this down to about 2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on it like that on the screen, and then I'm going to click create. So it's now made a clip. Okay, it's ready to take information, and if I touch clip right here, it'll now bring me to this, and you can see on the left side here are the different pads. So 1 through, what is it, 8, 9, 10, 10. So it's got all the different ones there. Now I could just paint them in if I wanted to, or I can use a step sequencer, which is right here, to actually play them, or I can just record myself playing them live. Now, for purposes of making this not too long of a video, I've actually created a pattern for this particular groove that I kind of dig. And you can save clips as MIDI. For example, if I had any information here, I can go up here to this icon right here where it has the pencil. And then right here, oh, I'm sorry, let me close that. If I can go to save, I can go to save right over here on this side. And you can see here on towards the bottom, clip as MIDI. Now, when you do that, save it as clip or MIDI, this is something interesting that I didn't realize. I actually asked this in some forums, and some people didn't know this because there was an old MPC format called MPC pattern, and it used to be that this was not an option here. It would say, I think it said save or copy as, clip as pattern, I think it was. So it would save it in the .mc pattern format. Well, with this particular one here, if you click this, I didn't realize this, but there's actually 2 things here. You can save it as a MIDI or you can save it as a pattern, which is pretty awesome. Digging that. Anyways, I don't have anything to save, so no big deal. What I have done, though, prior to this, so we can save some time on the video, is I've actually created a nice little groove that I kind of dig. And so I'm going to load that into this clip. And so I'm going to go to my hard drive. I'm going to go to my patterns folder. And I got a variety of different patterns. I tend to label ones that are melodic a different way, but for drums, I just leave it as this. So I have one for Ain't No Sunshine. You can see it's a .mid. I don't know if you can see that very well on the screen, maybe kind of blurred. But this one here says .mid. So I'm clicking in on this or hitting load, either one. And now it should be labeled, it should be in the clip now. So if I hit clip, you can see I've actually got the different notes listed there for that. Pretty awesome. Now it's also giving me a launch button over here because now I actually have a clip that I can launch in this scene. Okay, so if I click it, now it's actually really slow. So let me speed this thing up here. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've actually made this in double time so that I can change it at any time to do whatever tempo I want. But in this particular case, I believe it's 150 if I'm not mistaken. But having that, but anyways, you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to launch again. Yeah, there we go. So the actual delay thing is kind of interesting. So you can see I've kind of sparsely laid those out, but I've got that delay, that dotted eighth delay kind of dragging out there, which is kind of awesome. Right. So that's how I do the drums part of it there. And again, what I could have done is I could have just done one of them deals and recorded it into the clip. Okay, so either way would have been fine. But again, I didn't want to sit there and try to mess it because sometimes I mess up and I get my time corrector wrong and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to belabor this video with all that nonsense. So anyways, I see all that stuff listed there. That's my MIDI clips. And again, I can save that as MIDI or as an MPC pattern, which is pretty awesome. So now if I go back to launch mode, I have one clip. And if I click on matrix here, you can see I do have one clip and that's it. Okay, so this particular one. Now the way I like to structure this song for when I play live is I like to leave the bass out for the very first part and just kind of play the keys. So let's move over to keys for a second here. So we're on keys now, and we don't have anything loaded here because this is for a plugin. So I'm going to go ahead and go to menu, and there's a sounds, which is right here. And I have some sounds that I dig, and so if you hit the sounds right here, if you hit it again, it'll bring up your favorites. And you can get favorites by, if you're going through a plugin and you're digging what you're hearing, and you want to save it as this, you would come to something like here and you would hold in on one of those pads and it would save it as a preset, okay? So for this particular one, I can't remember which one I used. I think it was like Gentle Tines or something like that. I'm going to click it. I'm going to hit Edit Instrument so I can kind of view it and screw with it if I need to. But this is what they call, this one here is called Fabric. And so up here on the top, you can see where it says Fabric. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. It's blurring a little bit when I move motion. That's one I bought. So it's actually not part of the Akai by default. You have the hype synth, you have tube synth, and you have electric, I think. And those one and drum synth as well. Those ones come with the Akai Force, I believe, and they have some really great sounds as well. For me, I just prefer the sounds of Fabric. Now there is different type of Fabric as well. There's the Fabric XL, and that's a heavier, a lot larger samples, and that's going to tap into your CPU and memory usage. So if you go here to Menu, and you look on the top right up here, you'll see the CPU and memory usage. In this case, we have 11% memory and 12% CPU. It's always good to be mindful of that so it doesn't crash mid-project, especially when you haven't saved for a while. And that's another thing you should do is save a lot. In this case, I'm not going to save for this. I'm just going to go through it just to crank through. But be mindful of that there, okay? All right, I'm going to go back to track edit so I can view this, and if I need to modify anything with the sound, I'll do it there. But again, we don't see anything on the pads down here because I have to hit note, okay? So now I see. Okay, it's got a pretty nice sound. Yeah, I like that. So we'll use that for now, and when you go over here to the left, if you hold Shift and you hold Note at the same time, so Shift, Note, it'll bring up the note configuration menu. This is pretty awesome what they've done here. They've got a lot of different cool things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it in scale mode. And I'm going to give you a short music theory tip at this point here. The song itself is going to be in A minor. And I'll probably do some videos later to go a little bit more into some music theory so you can kind of understand what you're making and how you're making it and such. But just for giggles here, just humor me on just a very short music theory for this particular one. So when you think about Western music, you have typically everything kind of revolves around what they call the major scale, and you've seen it or heard it in, like, you know, Sound of Music, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? So if you're looking at a major scale, you're thinking of 7 different notes essentially. Now you have 12 notes altogether that you can screw around with in general music here, and that would include things they call sharps and flats, things like that. But in general, for the major scale, for instance, you have 7 notes that you're going to mess with, and there's certain patterns you can use. In this particular case, you can see what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down here. I'm going to move this top thing right up here, and I'm going to move it down to start on the root so that it's easier to see and visualize what I'm talking about here. So in this particular case, I've got the C, key of C, right there, and I've got it set to major, okay? So in the key of C major, I know some people, myself included, have troubles remembering some of the letterings, some of the names of the notes. So one thing you can do is you can just think more in the terms of numbers. And what I mean by that is you can say, these right here on this side, based on what I've set on the screen here, these are all the root note. In this case, C. These are all C's. Different octaves of C. And this, over this side, is C as well. So, C, C. So it's octaves of them. And everything in between makes the scale. So everything here is in scale. I will never play out of scale if I stick with this view I have right now. If my song is in major, I have no problem playing this stuff right here, right? So if you think in terms of numbers, 1, root note, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 would be the octave. Okay, would be the number, the root, but an octave higher. So if you think in terms of that, if you want to build chords, the basic formula for making major chords, or making chords in general, using this method, is the 1, the 3, and the 5. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I hold them down, that is a chord. That is a triad. They call it a triad because it's 3 notes. In this particular case, in the C major scale context, this is a C major scale. And again, if you don't know the note names, so C, D, E, F, G, right? If you don't know C, E, and G, that's fine. At least know the numbers. That's what I'm going to kind of speak in terms of when I do my theory stuff. I'm going to speak in terms of numbers because it's easier to see that when you're dealing with the pads like you see here. So if I got 1, 2, 3, there's my C. Now, every major key also has what they call a relative minor key. And that minor key is always going to be the 6th note of whatever that key is. So here's my key of C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So whatever that note is, that is the minor that is relative to this C major. So here's a C major note. This is the relative minor. In this case being A. A is the relative minor. Now generally when people speak, and I'm talking generally, if they say the song is in the key of G, that means G major, unless they specify something different. If they want it in minor, they'll say it. They'll say G minor. They'll say A minor. If they're saying a song is in A minor, what they're also saying is that it's in C major, because it is the relative key of that major scale, which means all the notes that are here for C major are also the same notes that are in for A minor. Okay? So in this particular case, I know that A minor is the key that I want to play in. So I'm emphasizing, out of the C major scale, I'm emphasizing the 6th note. Okay? But I can still play all of the notes that are in the C major scale and they'll sound right because they're all part of the same scale. They're all part of the same key, essentially. So the underlying key of A minor is C major. Okay? But I'm saying the song is in A minor. So I'm going to use the A. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3. So in this particular case, these two and this one is my A minor. Now, another important little tip here that you could use that's pretty useful is this just is always the case. I don't really know, any other way to put it, is that when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about creating chords and wanting to know what chords are in a C major scale, you can think of it in this manner. The 1, the 4, and the 5 of any key of any of the major scales is always major. So this is always going to be major. The 4 is always going to be a major chord. And the 5th is always going to be a major chord. That leaves us with the 2, the 3, and the 6 as being minor, always minor. And then the 7th is what they would call a diminished chord. We won't get into that because it's not used a lot in Western music, mainly just the major and minor. So if you look at any key, it doesn't matter what it is, of whatever scale you're in, G, F, C, it doesn't really matter. If you look at the 1, the 4, and the 5, they will always be a major chord, always. So if you're saying, I want my song to have a major feel, and I want it to only really have a major feel, and I want it to be in the key of C major, what are my chords, Mr. Acidicloop, that I can use to make it all sound major? Well, you can use the C, which is the root, and you can use the 4, and you can use the 5. If you play those 3 chords throughout your entire song, they will all be major chords, and they will all be a very major feel to it. However, at any time, if you decided to make it interesting and throw a minor in there, you can use any of the 2, the 3, or the 6. I can use this, D minor, okay? I can use this, E minor. And either way, it's going to sound really awesome because it's in the same key. It's in the same scale. So in this particular case, the 3 notes that I'm going to be dealing with are going to be the A minor, and I'm going to be doing the E minor. I'm sorry. And then the D minor. So E minor, D minor, and then the A minor. Those are the only 3. So the root of the very first part of the song is A. Does that for a little bit. And then it goes to an E minor. Then it goes to a D minor. Then it goes back to an A minor. That's going to be the crux of the song. And I'm going to do it a little bit lower, though. see, you can play any type of lick with it, and in any of these pads that you have here, it will sound right. Whether or not it's melodic is another story, but it will sound right because it's in the same scale. So in this particular case, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do our A minor. Dun, 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 dun. Ba-da, ba-da, ba, ba-da, ba. Ba, 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 ba. And we'll end with that, okay? Now, what's also cool about the Akai Force is that you can tell what outs you want your metronome to go to. So if you're playing live and you have a speaker system and the people are hearing the main outs, but you don't want them to hear the metronome, you can set that by holding Shift and then the metronome, which is down here. And you can see right there where it says out, okay? That's going out to the main mix. So it's going out to my my mixer over here. So you'll be able to hear it for this session. But if I wanted to, I could switch it to 3/4, which means it just goes to these knobs right here in the front, and I can turn up or turn down the volume. This is what they call cueing in DJ terms, if you will, where they're cueing up a track coming up next, so they don't want the audience to hear it. This is what they're using. They're using like a cue mix. So you can do that on your metronome by holding Shift and doing the metronome deal right there. For now, though, we're just going to keep it here as out 1 and 2 for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, play me an intro click for the record, okay, at the beginning, a count in, and then only play the clip while I'm recording. After the recording, no more clip, okay? No more click, I'm sorry. So that's the settings we're going to set here for this, but you can also set it for record and play, or play, turn it off altogether, whatever you want to set. So they got all kinds of different options you can do it for. That's what we're going to set it for today, okay? So we're good there. Let's come back here to the matrix now. So now we've gone over our little music theory. Thank you for humoring me for that particular part there. What we're going to do next is I'm going to turn off the time correct, because a lot of times if I'm doing something rhythmically that I want to keep that way, even though it may be off a little bit of time, kind of humanizing it, if you will, I don't want the time correct to put it right at the right snap grid format. You know, I want to be able to have that little bit of, humanized version to it. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to go down here to where it says time correct, and I'm going to hit this to turn it off, so it's no longer on. So I'm going to turn off time correct for this, but if you want to have it just, straight up the way it is, then keep that on, right? Now in this particular case here, I can go ahead and play my drums as my click as well if I want, but it doesn't really matter. I think I'll keep the drums in just to play along with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a clip, but this one here is a little bit different because this one is going to be longer than the 2 measures that I've set for this first one. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to click this, hold into on this button, and you can see I can set it here. I'm going to set it to 8 measures, which I think this is what it is. So, I think it's 8 measures. If it's not, then we'll find out. So now we've set this clip here. The next clip that I make will be 8 measures, and it will stop recording after 8 measures. Now you can do it free time and just hit it whenever you're done. For me, I like to just set it up this way. So I'm going to go ahead and create a clip by holding in on it. Click on Create. It's now ready to go, okay? Now something I've noticed with this, I didn't realize this until recently. Sometimes my metronome and stuff would not work properly unless I've stopped everything completely. So up here on the stop, let me move my hand, up here on stop, I stopped it so that these are all solid colors. I do that every single time because if I don't, the metronome will start clicking whenever I hit record or whenever I hit just play or enable or anything like that. So remember that when you're doing the recordings, always make sure if you're going to be recording something, hit stop right there to make sure everything is stopped. So now I'm ready to go, got my launch going, but there's one more thing I need. Is down here on the bottom, you'll see there's some buttons. One of them is called Record Arm. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click this button right there because I'm going to record on this track. Okay, and it doesn't matter what clip I'm recording into, it's saying for this entire track, this thing is armed and ready to rock. Next, I want to hit this record right here, like that. Now, if you didn't stop your tracks right here, and you would have hit record, the click would have started, and it would have already went ahead of you without you, being ready. So be mindful when you want to record something, hit stop so that's all solid, and then hit record. That bad boy is now ready to rock and roll. All you have to do now is hit launch. It'll give you the count in, and we're going to do a 1, and then I'll be doing like a ba-da-ba-ba-ba-bum, And then we'll do like a boom, boom, boom. So nothing really crazy or anything, just simple chords. Now another way you can do this, just to let you know, is if I go here to shift and note, is I can instead choose, if I can go ahead, if I do harmonize, I can just go like this. And it does the chord for me. So I can just do boom, 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 boom. So harmonize is saying just what I told you just a minute ago. It's taking each note in the scale and then making them a chord. It's basically doing the 1, 2, the 1, 3, and the 5 on each one for me. Now, I don't prefer to do it that way for this song because I do want to add that little ba-da-ba-ba. I want to add that in there. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to scale. Just like that. There we go. There we go. And so that's what I'm going to use for this because I want to add that little. So let's do it. Let's go back here to the matrix. We are ready, armed here, ready to rock. Let's do it. Okay, so I messed up. So that means that it's not 8 measures. It's probably 16. So we're going to come back, and what I'm going to do is you notice how I stopped everything, so it deleted it. So I'm going to go ahead and hold in on this, okay? And I'm going to click delete, and I'm going to go back and hold shift, and I'm going to hold this one again. That'll bring up that menu. So now I know it's going to be 16 measures. I thought it was 8. Now we should be ready to rock. And now we'll go ahead and click create again. Again, I click stop so that these are ready to go. And again, I have to hit record right there. And now it's ready to go, armed. Let's try it again. Here we go, launch. So I messed up there. You'll do this often. I hit the wrong notes down on the bottom. So let's go ahead and delete that. But I'm showing you how you can do this really easily, and it would take some practice to get right. So let's try it again. Whoop. So I didn't actually arm it like I should have. So this is armed here, but I forgot to hit record. So let's do that again. Messed up again, but let me show you. So we're good. So let me show you what we do to fix that issue that I just had there where I hit that extra note. I didn't do that on purpose, but I guess I did, right? So let's go back here, and I'm going to go back to launch. I'm going to make sure I hit select or hold select. Select the clip I want. Go to clip. So the bad note I had was further down here. So let's see here. Let's play that. So this right here is your piano roll, and you can kind of see the notes. So if you want to go ahead and mess with anything or change anything or delete anything, this is where you can do all that. So right around here, right there, that's the one. All right, so this little note right up here, so I'm going to go over here to grid. Let me see if I can move my hand here. I'm going to go to grid, which is the second one. And I'm going to select this zoom first. And I'm going to zoom in on this huckleberry right there. That's my huckleberry right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the eraser, which is right there. Okay, I selected the eraser, second one. And I'm going to hit that and delete it. So it's no longer there. No longer there. Now I can also do this because I can see, I'm going to go back to my pencil now instead of my eraser. And I can see that this note, oh, dang it. Let me erase that. Let me go to my select. So select is the third one. I'm going to go ahead and drag and select this one because you can see it's not actually fully the full note. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click where it says edit start right there. And and I'm going to go ahead and turn this wheel, and you can see it will add that note. And I can set the snapping on it to make it a little bit quicker, but so like that. So that should make it nice and clean. Let's try it. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, there we go. Coming to it. Groovy. All right, so she's ready to rock. So that's a simple thing you can do either on the fly, or if you're doing it in a session and you want to make it absolutely perfect, you can make sure you do it that way. But that's, I didn't intend to do that, but it's good that I did, because now I can show you the clip editing mode, and that's how you would actually edit that particular click to make sure it's correct, okay? All right, very cool. So now we have the drum and the piano. Everything should be fine on that. Everything's good. All right, so let's go back here to launch, and we'll go back to matrix mode. All right, next we want to move into our bass, okay? Now, before we actually do that, let's do something else. No, actually, we'll do the bass first. So let's click on the bass, and we'll go to menu. For me, I have some sounds I dig, and in particular, for this type of song, I think the jazz bass they have is really nice. Right here, double bass. I kind of dig this one. I'm going to go back to note mode, by the way. Okay, now one thing that I will do differently from when I play bass is I'm a guitarist generally. I mean, that's what I've been playing for, 20, 30 years or so. So I tend to think in terms of shapes on the guitar. So for me to play a bass line, sometimes I don't want to be always in scale, because sometimes there may be a chromatic walk down I want to do. So I don't want to have it be, restricted just to the scale. So what I'll do is I'll go to Shift, Note, and it'll bring up our note thing here. Now, here, if we switch down, you'll see Harmonize, which in this case would be all the notes in the scale done as chords. Then here, I can do just chords, and I can pick the chords I want. I can do like a 7th chord, whatever, craft it as I want. Progressions, which are really cool. We'll get into that in another video. It's already pre-made progressions for like jazz and dance hall and trance and things like that. Really cool stuff. Tonits, I think, are the scale. I haven't done those yet, but I think those are scales that actually add the other extra ghost notes in there. But guitar is the one I want. That's my huckleberry right there. Even though I'm playing bass, I'm not going to do the bass one. I'm more akin to the guitar. And because of that, I always stick with E as the beginning, and I always stick with the scale as being chromatic. Because now in my brain, there's E, A, D, G, right? B, E. So to me, this is how a guitar, if I'm holding the guitar, this is how I visually see it, okay? So A is A, right? These are the notes I'm familiar with, okay? This would represent the open strings right here. All of these are the open strings on your guitar, so these first row, or track here, column. And then here we go, so E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B, right? See, all that kind of good stuff right there, right? Or I'm sorry, B flat, B. So in this case here, A is our huckleberry. Now I don't really, that's got a lot of grit and growl to it, so I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is go to the bass. So what I've noticed here on this bass is that the format, if I lower that, it actually makes it less growly and more like a jazz bass. So right there. That's my huckleberry right there. Pretty nice. I like that. And if you go here to the main, hit that again. So hit the second one right here again. You'll see that you can set the percussion to be on or off. And that's kind of what gives it its upright bass feel, is that little, you can hear that little click, that little bit of percussion to it. But I can lessen that amount if it's getting too crazy. And if it's messing with the drums too much, I can do that. But I'm not going to. And I'm really not going to mess with anything else here, although you can mess with some of the different things like the chorus, tremolo, give it some delay, some reverb. And this one's really cool. This flavor plugin's got a lot of cool stuff that you can do with it. But in my opinion, the way I've been working with it, that format is the major thing for me. Also, you can change the amp model, which is really cool. And this is one of the reasons I like plugins over key groups, because you don't get this with key groups. With key groups, you get a sample, and that's it. So if the sample's not made correctly, you're kind of screwed, because it's kind of the way it is, and the only thing you can really do to mess with it is EQ. This, I can save this project, and then 3 weeks from now, bring this project back up, and still keep changing the sound. And it will modify everything I've recorded in real time. Same with the keys that I just did. If I say, you know what, I don't really like those keys in particular, I'm going to get a whole new instrument, I can easily just do it. And it will keep the MIDI information, so it will keep the pattern, and then from there, you know, it'll keep the clip information, but then just change the tone. So anyways, this is really cool. I'm digging what I'm hearing. So let's go back here to the main. So we're kind of wanting a boom, and then we want E, G, A. And so I'm just kind of keep it in the scale. Now, in this case, I don't have the scale format, so every note here is not going to be in scale. But I just happen to know from playing that I can kind of mess with I kind of know the scale that I'm wanting to screw around with, okay? So in this particular case, I'm doing A, E, G, A, and sometimes I'll throw in the C there, and then from there I'll do the D. So I'm adding this extra one, which would not be in the normal scale, but it would be part of maybe the blues scale or something like that. But I'm adding this chromatic walk-up. So I'm doing like a little rundown on the scale here to do that. So I'm thinking, boom, boom, boom. And then it's going to move to the E, down to the D, ba-dum, bum, 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 boom, 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 right? So that's kind of the groove we're going to be going for right there. And again, we already know it's 16 measures. I don't have to set it that way because it keeps track of what I've actually set it for. So it's always going to be 16 measures until I change it to something else. So we're going to keep it as is. I'm going to go ahead and create the clip. So this time now, I have to make sure this one is record armed. First time I did it, and I record armed this third one, but I'm going to do this one here. Now, again, what I was telling you, as you can see, these are not solid colors, which means if I were to go ahead and start record, it starts automatically with the clip, okay? And I don't want that. So I want to actually get the count in. So I have to hit stop, right, until all of them are solid color, ready to rock and roll, okay? So now that it's ready, now I can hit record, get that bad boy blinking, and let's hopefully we don't screw this up. Ah, already screwed it up. Spoke too soon, spoke too soon. Oh, let's do delete. Whoops, wrong one. Oh, actually, you know what? I forgot about this. Let's do this. Let's craft this correctly while we're doing it. So in my opinion, the way I want to do this for my live show is I want the first scene to launch and to play just the drums and the keys and allow me to kind of noodle on the guitar to kind of give it a nice feel. And then I want to bring the bass in on the second scene. So this next scene is what I want this one to actually have the bass on. So I don't actually want the bass on the first scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold copy right here, and I'm going to click this and tap below it, okay? And I know that in the middle of this song, it does, I know, I know, I know, I know. So I know it has a little drum part there. So I know there's going to be a third scene that will actually have that. So I'm going to hit copy again and copy the drum there. Now for the keys, I only want to copy it to the next scene. So hold copy, boom, ready to go. So now I know that I want to make my clip in the second scene for my bass. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's a good thing I messed up because I was making this incorrectly to begin with. So back to record, ready to rock, let's do it. Perfect. We are now rocking and rolling, loving life. So the beginning of the song will start by me launching the first scene, which will be just that, and then me noodling on the guitar. And then I'll do some more guitar. And get ready to hit the next scene. And next. Nice. There we go. We have created the clips that we need for the entire song. Next, we go into the mixer because we want to kind of mix and get these things correctly, and so they're not like hitting each other too much. First thing I like to do is add some paramedic EQ to each one of them. So if I go to the volume here, if I go to the mixer button and come over here, I can see all the different tracks. If I go ahead and click on this, I'm going to go ahead and under EQ filter, and these are ones that are built in to the Akai. I'm going to hit add paramedic EQ and hit select. And the next one I'm going to do is add paramedic EQ there and add paramedic EQ. Yes, no? There we go. Add it there. Awesome. All right. I'm going to pause the video for a second because my dog is tripping and I think it needs to go out. So let me pause for a moment. All right, sorry about that. Dogs don't really care that you're recording anything. They just, if they gotta go, they gotta go. Yeah, I know how it is. All right, so anyways, where were we? So we were making our mixer parts. Now, I'm definitely not a pro at the mixing side of things, but I have been doing some research and some reading because I've noticed a lot of my mixes have been a little bit muddied, and I wanted to figure out how to do a better mix. So what I've been reading is that there's frequency ranges, and if you're not familiar with this stuff, then this will be awesome. If you are, then just tune out for a second. But there are frequency ranges from around, from what I'm reading, like minus 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz, and trying to figure out where to cut and what to cut and what frequencies to focus on or to boost or reduce is definitely an art in itself, and people go to college for this sort of thing. But just for generic, basic messing around here, doing this stuff on this to get a good mix, think about the frequencies that you're dealing with. Like for the bass guitar, the E, I believe, is 40 hertz. I think that operates around that area. Or I've read some that say it's around 60 to 80 hertz. So the general consensus that I'm seeing is that for low stuff on, let's say, maybe a guitar, there's really no need in the mix to have the guitar screwing around with anything 100 hertz and below. We want to reserve that for the bass and the kick to do their thing. But now we got to also worry about the kick and the bass and make sure they don't step on each other. So a lot of times they add in these things they call either a high pass filter or a low pass filter to eliminate certain frequencies to make the mix a lot cleaner and make it so that it don't compete for the same frequency. And in a lot of cases, when you do a high pass, sometimes it'll be called a low cut and a high cut, which would be kind of, it's the same terms, but they do different things. So for instance, the high pass is saying, I'm setting a frequency number, let's say 40 hertz. Everything above 40 hertz, I'm passing. I'm allowing it to be in the mix. Anything below 40 hertz, I want out of this mix. So in this particular case, for let's say the keys, okay, the keys really don't have a business being down in the 40 hertz range. That is a lot of reserved low space for bass. Now, you also have really low frequencies that you also have to think about, like sub bass, what they call subs, which is around the 20 hertz, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a lot of speakers systems out there that don't even really support that. So a lot of times you don't even really need to mess with 20 hertz or below either. So even on bass, you can actually go ahead and do a low or a high pass and set it, to cut off maybe even around 20 hertz or 40 hertz or whatever. If you want to kind of keep it in the fat range of 40 hertz and 100 hertz or something like that, then you can set your high pass filter to cut off the lower end stuff, maybe around 20 hertz or 30 hertz or whatever you want to, whatever is good for your ear, because it's not always the same for every song. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it's just general rules. Same thing goes for vocals. Vocals usually generate, certain, hertz, and there's really no need for it to be in the lower ranges of like 80 and 100 hertz, or even some cases up to 800 hertz, right? So sometimes that's the way you got to think about it. Then you got the kick drum, which will operate in the lower end as well, and you got to make sure it doesn't, mess with the bass and all that kind of stuff. So just for basic EQ functionality, I'm just going to do a simple mix, and usually I'll do a paramedic EQ. And there's always debate about where you put compression. For me, I'm not going to do the compression on this particular one, but I'm going to add in later because I'm still kind of learning that. I don't want to do it incorrectly to begin with, but compression is always something you probably want to add as well. But just for this video, we're going to do just basic paramedic EQs. So I'm going to hit the first one for the drums, and I'm just going to solo the drum part itself, okay? Now, usually, let me stop that for a second. Usually what I'll do is I'll go through the different settings they have here, because they got some really good settings, a lot of good presets. But if you look here where it says high and low cut, that's what I was talking about a second ago, how they're used interchangeably. In this case, if I'm doing a low cut, that means it's a high pass. So low cut filter and high pass filter are the same. High cut filter and low pass filter are the same, right? Because you're allowing low ends to pass below a certain frequency, and you're cutting higher parts out. So in this case, they use the terms high cut and low cut. So in here, in this case, if I want to cut anything below, I don't know, let's say like right here, if I want to cut below 20 hertz, right? I can do that to try to say, let me just get rid of anything that could possibly be there in the sub-range level that doesn't really need to be there, right? I could do that. Or I can just go ahead and pick a preset, and I usually like to start with this light smiley one. I kind of like that one. And you can see it does automatically apply at, what, 31 frequency? 31 hertz frequency. It turns it on for that automatically for this particular setting. So I'm going to leave it at that for a minute. And if you go to the EQ, notice here that it has that right here if I want to boost certain ranges. So usually the 70, I'm going to say 60 to 100 hertz maybe in this range is where you're going to find the bass and the kicks and you know, good sounds like that for that. When you start getting into the 200s, this is what they call the muddy level, where things can start getting muddy. And if they get real muddy, you can actually turn down the gain on some of that level there. And then you got the higher mids, which is kind of where the guitars would lay, maybe even some keys and stuff. And then vocals would be up in this high and mid-high stuff here. So if you're noticing that there's a lot of mud and you really want to bring out some of the more mid-range sounds to your instrument, then this is where you can start boosting these things. And the Q, which is this middle one here, is what they call a spread as far as like narrow or wide. And sometimes you don't want it too narrow because then it sounds plasticky, but then again, you also don't want it too wide because then it may be getting muddy. So you got to get a good moderate Q range. It's kind of like how wide you're going to have this particular, how much of this frequency are you going to include? If you want to really make it narrow and just down to like 2,000 hertz or whatever, you would make the Q length, like in this case here, down to like narrow to just that. So this is where you can boost some of that. So if we pick this already, okay, sounds all right. Now if you start going down through some of the presets, okay, that one's got a little bit heavier in. That one's kind of interesting. So that one's got a real thick pound to it. So that one you can really hear the kick really accentuated. That one's a lot thinner. Some of these other ones up here in this area are more for the bass and the guitar, so I don't usually mess with that. So usually I stick between either thicken or heavy smiley. And I'm feeling that's got a little bit too much to me, I think. So I'm going to stick with heavy smiley, I think. And I'm going to add some in the higher range to get more of a tops sound to it. There we go. And I'm okay with that. Again, I'm not a mastering guru, but that'll work for now. Next I want to do is go here to the paramedic, and I want to go to volume. And here, you want to look at the dB levels. And there's really not a whole lot of reason to go above 0 in a lot of cases, unless you really want to crank it, because then you start having, whoops, what am I doing here? There we go. You want to kind of keep it a little bit below 0 in case you want to mix it later and increase gain on stuff. So if you're working with a mix, with a producer or a mixer guy, you kind of want to leave some of that space for him. So it's a general rule I like to keep to kind of make sure it doesn't go above 0. I try to keep it like -3 dB, -6 dB, something like that. That's usually a general rule that I follow. All right, we're good to go on that one. So now let's move over to the bass. And let's stop this. And let's solo out the bass here. And again, it's a good idea to solo it when you're actually applying the effect first, but then you want to actually add it in and start messing with it more when you have other instruments bled in, because humans aren't going to listen to your song and they're not going to just single out the, the bass or the kick in there and just listen to that. So even if you say, hey, it sounds killer soloed out like this, well, it may not sound killer in the whole mix as a whole, right? So let's do the bass one here. Let's start this one. All right. So what I usually like to do is I like to go to the bass and standard. Okay, so that one sounds really muddied, but it has a lot of low end to it. So let me try the thicken. That was not too bad. Let me try the heavy smiley. Okay, so that one accentuates a lot more of the jazz bass sound to it. I kind of like that. Let's try the light smiley, see what that one sounds like. That's a little weaker. This heavy smiley's got a little bit more punch to it. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bump up some of the mid-range. Yeah, I kind of like that. And again, you can do this in the instrument as well because they have a mixer in there and you can set the high, mids, and lows on that as well. But for this purpose, I'm just doing it through here. Let's go to the volume. Make sure it's not hitting above. We can bring it up a little bit. Let's try it with the drums. All right, comes through pretty clear. They don't seem to be competing too bad with each other. Now you can also use something called a mother ducker on here. That's the name of it. And what a mother ducker will do is you can set the kick to be the initiator for it. And you can say every time there's a kick, bring the bass down slightly. Compress the bass for a minute, for just that brief second that the kick is going. That way the kick is always kind of resounded and they're never really hurting each other. So you can actually add that in as well if you wanted to. I'm not planning on doing that here, but let me just show you how you can do something like that, seeing as I'm talking about it. So you can come over here, for instance, down to dynamics. I think it's under. Yeah. So right here you have two different ones. You have mother ducker input, and that's what you want to put on the kick in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and then here I'm going to go down to the same one, and I'm going to do the mother ducker, not the input, but the mother ducker itself, and select. Now you'll notice if I go back to the kick, see where it says bus 1 right there? That's important to know because when you come back here and you look at the bass, you can see right there, bus 1. That's the one we want to actually do it to. So that's in case you want to use the mother ducker with other instruments as well. So let me play both of these here so you guys can kind of see. Okay, so that's got a heavy amount. Let me move the threshold here. So right there, if I move the threshold down, look at that. It starts that pumping effect that you hear on some stuff, and the duck is just cranking, he's moving. But I don't want that much. So I'm gonna bring the threshold up a little bit. So right here is where you're seeing this. See where it's coming down? Bum, 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 bum. That's the kick right there, and it's saying when the kick is happening, compress that bass a little bit. It's still a little bit too pumpy for me. I kind of like that. But I'm still not really good at this stuff yet. I'm still learning this. But that's the basic premise of it. So you can use it if you want. I'll just keep it on here just for giggles. But anyways, that's how you would do what they call ducking in this particular case. They call it sidechain compression is another name they give it as well. All right, so let's go back here to the mixer. And let's do our last one, which is, whoops, doggone it. Paramedic, there we go. So now we're going to do our keys. Let's go ahead and do our keys. So this one here, we want a lot higher, lighter sound. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll come to instrument, and the sweetener one has a pretty good one where it doesn't have a lot of low end. but it does increase some of the high end there. And what we can also do, turn on the cut, turn on the low cut, which in this case is a high pass filter. And I'm gonna say, I really don't have any need for anything, let's say 200. Somewhere around 200. Okay, so I don't have any real need for that. So I'm gonna turn that on. And now that will get rid of any type of lower end stuff that may be bleeding into the bass or the guitar. And it makes it really a lot more high end. So let's hear them all together here. Not too bad, not too bad. So now we'll come back to the volume, make sure this one is not going over too high. Okay, that's pretty good. Sounds like the bass can go up a little bit. Nice. All right. So all in all, I think we did pretty good for just screwing around for somebody who doesn't really know anything about mastering. I think we did some pretty good stuff with this. Now, let me get my guitar here. 1 second here. There, hitting everything. All right, let me get my headsets back on here. All right, let's see how this sounds with the guitar as well. All right, so typically what I would do for this song here is I would start off live. I would just play this. Right? Start off with that. So one thing I didn't mention here is that when I'm playing live, because I'm playing the guitar as well, I don't have the luxury of timing for getting it right on the muddy to hit the next launch scene. So what I like to do is if you hold shift down here on the bottom, you have how many beats you want to wait for it to launch whenever you click scene or whatever. In my case, I'm going to click this next one right here, which says 2 bars. So it's going to wait 2 bars to go to the next scene. It's not going to go immediately. That gives me enough time to hit it, get back to my guitar, and start playing. So, again, what I'm going to do is hit this, and then when it gets about the time I want to switch, I'm going to go ahead and click that and bring it in. So, start off with this. Here, I can go ahead and hit this and be ready to go. Yeah. And then I can bring in the vocals on it. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. It's not warm when she's away. Ain't no sunshine when she's gone. She's always gone too long. At a time she goes away. And then if I need to, I can go to that one part. And I know, 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 I know. And then I look for that. And then I time how I'm going to come in on this because again, it does it on this every 2 beats. So I'll be like, hey, I'm going to leave this poor thing alone. Ain't no sunshine where she's gone. Now, I don't really have a good way to end it. But what I want to invest in is I want to invest in a MIDI foot pedal that sends machine messages, because then I can then hit a foot pedal and then trigger this stop right here so that it stops immediately and doesn't wait for the 2-beat. So if I want to end it with some kind of guitar line only, I can do that. But I don't have that, so this is what I have currently. Anyways, I think that about does it then for this lesson here of how I made the song Ain't No Sunshine and how I would play it live. And I play in virtual worlds, and I also play in real life as well, some festivals and things like that. But I do a lot of virtual worlds like Second Life, Open Sim, all those different kinds of places. And so every night I'm kind of doing this, right? I'm triggering samples and playing and doing concerts and this and that. And you can check out my YouTube and subscribe to that if you want to see videos of more of these sort of things. And I also have performances I do there, and I also do live streams of my shows that I do in virtual worlds. So feel free to go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell for that. But until next time, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to get in the loop. Acidicloop. Peace out, players.